9 minutes, 5 Russian machines, 0 survivors, and the unit that did it had 1 tank fewer, 1,000 meters less of firepower range, and 0 air support. What you are about to hear is not a war story. It is a case study in what 3 years of real combat does to a fighting unit, and what happens to the side that did not learn fast enough. Stay locked in, because the detail that decided this entire clash happened in under 3 seconds, and most military analysts missed it completely. The ground tells you everything if you know how to read it. Eastern Ukraine in mid-April is not the same battlefield it is in July. The spring thaw turns agricultural fields into soft traps. Mist sits low between tree lines, cutting visibility in terrain depressions to near zero. Elevated rural routes become the only reliable arteries for armored movement, which means both sides are funneled toward the same narrow paths through contested land. This is called the gray kill zone. Not a line on a map, a living space between Ukrainian and Russian defensive positions where neither side holds ground permanently, but both sides move through it daily, running patrols, reconnaissance elements, and supply runs to forward shooting points. It is lethal by nature, accepted by necessity, and survivable only if your crews have been drilled specifically for what it produces. That morning, 2 armored formations were moving through the same gray kill zone on converging routes. Neither knew the other was there. If this kind of tactical analysis is what you follow, make sure you hit subscribe now, because we break these clashes down daily, and this one gets significantly more disturbing from here. The Ukrainian formation was 3 machines. A T-64BV main battle tank at the point, followed by 2 BMP-2 infantry combat vehicles, each carrying a mechanized infantry squad. Standard gray kill zone configuration, enough firepower to handle a hard contact. Compact enough to move fast and avoid a large target signature. The formation commander was up in his hatch, eyes forward, actively reading the ground. That detail is not incidental. A commander in the open hatch cuts the time from visual contact to firing order by several decisive seconds, compared to a commander sealed inside relying on optics alone. The Russian formation was larger. 5 machines, 2 T-72B3 main battle tanks leading, followed by 3 BMP-3 infantry combat vehicles. Approximately 65 personnel across 5 machines. This was not a light patrol. This was a committed push with a combat objective. Their commanders were also in the hatch. Both formations, by every standard of gray kill zone doctrine, were doing exactly what drilled crews are supposed to do. What separated them was not what they were doing when the clash started. It was what happened in the 3 seconds after it. The route curved approximately 90 degrees, a hedgerow on the inner edge, a muddy embankment on the outer. Neither lead armor could observe beyond the curve until they were within 300 meters of each other. 300 meters. At that range, a tank round reaches its target in approximately 1 second. A BMP autocannon burst covers the distance in under 2. At 08:23 local time, both lead vehicles rounded opposite ends of the curve simultaneously. Both commanders made visual contact at exactly the same moment. In armored warfare, this is called simultaneous acquisition. Doctrine treats it as the most ruthless version of a meeting clash because it removes even the marginal advantage of having spotted the enemy a second before being spotted yourself. When both sides see each other at the same instant, the entire outcome is decided by one thing only: who has drilled to move from observation to violence faster than conscious thought can intervene. The Ukrainian T-64BV commander had the fire command out before his prefrontal cortex had completed its deliberate assessment. This is not rhetorical language. The human brain, under sudden high-stress visual stimulus, runs 2 pathways simultaneously. The fast amygdala-driven path generates action before analytical thinking finishes. In untrained people, this produces panic or freeze responses. In soldiers drilled specifically and repeatedly for this exact scenario, it generates the correct combat reaction automatically. Ukrainian armored crews operating in the gray kill zone have been drilling the meeting clash for 3 years, not in classrooms, but as recurring timed rituals that begin with a sudden enemy vehicle appearing at killing range and end with a firing command delivered in minimum time. Commanders who take longer than 5 seconds from contact to order are retrained, not punished, retrained. The standard is not perfection, the standard is survival. The Ukrainian T-64BV's first round struck the lead Russian T-72B3 on the frontal plate at 08:23 and 14 seconds from the top of the minute. From the moment of visual contact, the fire command and round were away in under 3 seconds. The T-72 stopped. Secondary detonations followed within 40 seconds, as its autoloader kept feeding shells into a fire it could no longer control. The lead Russian T-72B3 commander had achieved visual contact at the same moment as his Ukrainian counterpart. He was in the process of transmitting a contact report when the Ukrainian round hit his machine. He was following his training: report first, then engage. In a meeting clash at 300 meters, that sequence costs you the fight. His transmission was never completed. The second Russian tank, immediately behind the first, received no contact report. Its commander heard the explosion, watched the lead tank stop and begin burning, and was still reading the chaos when the Ukrainian tank's second round struck his left tread at 08:23 and 22 seconds. 8 seconds from first visual contact. 2 Russian tanks stopped. The clash, in every practical sense, was already decided, but understanding why requires looking at what the Ukrainian trailing vehicles did in the same 8 seconds, because this is where the gap between these two units becomes almost impossible to overstate. Ukrainian BMP-2 No. 1 turned hard left, off the route 3 seconds after the first Ukrainian shot. It drove 30 meters into the field on the left side, stopped in a slight depression providing partial hull cover, and opened fire with its 30mm autocannon at 08:23 and 25 seconds. Its first burst struck the lead Russian BMP-3 along its left side. Ukrainian BMP-2 No. 2 turned hard right 2 seconds later, moved 20 meters off the route, stopped behind the muddy embankment with its turret in a firing position, and opened fire at 08:23 and 28 seconds. Both BMP-2s were off the route and in firing positions within 11 seconds of the first Ukrainian round. Ukrainian infantry dismounted from both vehicles within 30 seconds. 12 soldiers moved into the fields on both sides of the route, establishing security against Russian infantry and providing the flanking presence that would prove decisive in the final minutes of the clash. This was not improvisation. It was a specific technical protocol for meeting clashes that Ukrainian armored commanders have developed, refined, and distributed across gray kill zone units through 3 years of exactly this kind of encounter. The protocol rests on one principle. The lead armor fires continuously, fixing the enemy's attention. The trailing vehicles instantly disperse to flanking positions, creating multi-directional pressure that no formation can effectively answer while simultaneously managing a direct frontal threat. The Russian formation's reaction in those same 30 seconds was structurally different, and not because the Russian crews lacked courage. The 2 lead T-72s were stopped, one burning, one immobilized. 3 BMP-3s were now on an elevated route with burning machines blocking their forward movement, Ukrainian fire arriving from the front and both flanks, and no contact report from either lead vehicle. Their commanders faced 3 options: stay on the route and absorb fire from multiple directions, reverse along the route, moving away from the contact but presenting rear armor to Ukrainian autocannon fire during the movement, or attempt to leave the route into the April fields. One commander reversed. One turned left into the field. One stayed on the route and returned fire. All 3 failed, not because each decision was individually irrational. Each was a reasonable response to a hopeless situation. They failed because they were made independently, without coordination, producing 3 separate reactions that could not support each other. A formation that responds to contact with 3 uncoordinated actions has divided itself into 3 smaller units, each of which can be crushed individually. That is exactly what happened over the next 9 minutes. The reversing BMP-3 moved along a fatal linear path on an elevated route directly across the kill axis of Ukrainian BMP-2 No. 1, already positioned 30 meters into the left field with a clear flanking sightline along the route's length. The reversing machine had covered approximately 40 meters when Ukrainian 30mm rounds struck its rear hull at 08:25 and 12 seconds. Rear armor on a BMP-3 is significantly thinner than its frontal protection. The rounds penetrated, the crew dismounted under fire. Some reached the embankment on the route's right side, most did not. The BMP-3 that had turned into the field drove 30 meters before its tracks lost traction in the soft April soil. At 45 meters from the route, it bogged completely. Tracks spinning in wet earth, stationary, fully exposed. No cover in any direction. Ukrainian BMP-2 engaged it from the right flank at approximately 180 meters. 3 volleys of 30mm autocannon fire into the vehicle's side. It stopped returning fire after the second burst. The third burst was confirmatory. This is what mid-April ground conditions mean in practical battlefield terms. A field that appears passable from the route becomes a mobility trap the moment a tracked vehicle commits to it without knowing the soil's load-bearing capacity. Ukrainian crews operating in that gray kill zone had that knowledge from months of operations in that specific terrain. The Russian formation did not. The last Russian machine, the BMP-3 that had stayed on the route and continued returning fire, was the hardest to kill and the most instructive to study. Its crew had chosen to fight. Their 30mm autocannon had been engaging the Ukrainian T-64BV throughout the clash, producing 2 hits on external equipment. A smoke grenade launcher destroyed, a vision block damaged, neither penetrated armor, neither degraded Ukrainian combat effectiveness in any meaningful way. But that crew fought. They kept fighting from a stationary position on an exposed route, under fire from multiple directions, with every other machine in their formation already stopped or burning. That kind of resolve deserves acknowledgement regardless of which flag a soldier serves under. It did not change the outcome. Ukrainian infantry, having established flanking positions in the first 2 minutes of the clash, engaged the vehicle with RPG fire at 08:29. 1 round struck the vehicle's side. It burned. At 08:32, 9 minutes and 9 seconds after first visual contact, the last Russian machine was burning and the clash was over. The after-action numbers are precise and brutal. The Ukrainian T-64BV sustained external equipment damage only and was battle-ready within hours. 1 Ukrainian infantry soldier was wounded by fragmentation during the final RPG engagement. He was treated, evacuated, and returned to duty within 48 hours. 0 Ukrainian machines destroyed. 0 Ukrainian personnel killed. Against that, 2 T-72B3 main battle tanks destroyed, 3 BMP-3 infantry combat vehicles destroyed, an estimated 27 to 33 Russian personnel killed in action. 14 additional survivors observed moving toward Russian lines during and after the clash, the majority assessed as wounded or in shock. The Russian formation had carried approximately 65 personnel across 5 machines. Russia lost an estimated $10 to $13 million in equipment and personnel. Ukraine sustained roughly $20,000 in external damage and 1 soldier who returned to duty 2 days later. These numbers are not extraordinary in isolation. They are extraordinary because they represent a pattern that has repeated consistently across 3 years of this war. And that pattern carries consequences that extend far beyond any single gray kill zone engagement. Since February 2022, Ukrainian armored units have demonstrated measurable and repeated advantages over Russian armored units in close-range clashes. Reaction speed, decision tempo, tactical flexibility under contact, and the ability to execute coordinated multi-element responses in the first 30 seconds of an unplanned engagement. These advantages were not innate, they were built through 3 years of combat experience that has been systematically captured, analyzed, and fed back into Ukrainian training pipelines with a speed and institutional discipline that most conventional military establishments cannot replicate even in peacetime. Every clash produced lessons. Every lesson was distributed. Every drill was updated to reflect what Ukrainian crews were actually encountering in the gray kill zone, not the theoretical scenarios of pre-war doctrine. The result is an armored force whose individual crew-level competence in the meeting clash scenario is among the highest of any unit currently operating in conventional ground warfare anywhere in the world. That is not a casual observation. It is a conclusion backed by 3 years of observable evidence. The Russian military's failures in this clash are not failures of individual soldiers. The lead T-72B3 commander, who was struck before completing his contact report, was following his training. The BMP-3 commanders, who made 3 different uncoordinated decisions in an impossible situation, were responding exactly as their training and command culture had prepared them to respond. The failure was institutional. It was in the system that trained them, the culture that structured their decision hierarchy, and the absence of a distributed, rapidly updated training pipeline that converts combat experience into reflexive crew-level competence. General Ben Hodges has assessed consistently across multiple analyses of this conflict that the Russian military's core failure is not hardware. Russia has equipment. Russia has numbers. What Russia has consistently failed to demonstrate is the kind of decentralized, initiative-driven, reflexively competent, small unit command that determines outcomes in the high-tempo, close-range clashes that define gray kill zone warfare. This mid-April meeting clash is a precise illustration of that assessment. A Russian formation with numerical superiority, 5 machines against 3, 2 tanks against 1, was systematically destroyed in 9 minutes by a smaller unit whose only real advantage was the quality of its crew's training and the speed of their decisions. Numbers did not save the Russian formation. Firepower potential did not save it. The T-72B3 and BMP-3 are lethal weapon systems. They were not outgunned. They were outthought. And the thinking had been done months before the clash even began, in drilling grounds and after-action reviews, and updated protocols that Ukrainian crews had internalized until reaction was faster than decision. That is what 3 years of high-intensity warfare buys a fighting force willing to learn from it. And that is what it costs when the institution on the other side refuses to. If this analysis shifted how you see this conflict, drop a comment below with one word: execution. We read every single one, and it tells us exactly what to cover next. Share this with someone who thinks this war is just about numbers and equipment. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now. We break down clashes like this one every single day, and tomorrow's analysis covers something even the senior commanders on both sides did not expect.